guys in the morning when we go to this virtual stuff.
Well,
you know?
I
You guys
tell
are
you
great.
what, put together and gorgeous are not words that I find
Oh, you are, girl.
normally applied to me in person, so maybe I should keep my distance permanently here. All right, so everybody, as we're beginning, I'm going to have you unmute yourselves for a moment like we did last week so that we can say good morning to each other. I'll give you a 3 count, and I encourage you on your screen to also look at the second screen so that you feel like you are greeting everybody here. So 1, 2, 3. Good morning,
Good morning.
everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
That's, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, that got a 4. So let's go again before we mute. 1, 2, 3. Good morning. Yeah, much better, much better. All right, so if you will kindly mute at your end, but also, as always, please feel free when you have something to say or ask, do not hesitate to interrupt because your comments are really important to us.
And so I'm going to interrupt on for a second. One of the things that you might think about, and this would be helpful to us as well. You know, we're used to being able to be face-to-face and encourage active involvement of everybody, you know, having discussion with as many people as we can. Having 50 people in this class doesn't lend itself as much, but I think as we talk to teachers, that's one of the concerns of, you know, being able to get kids to not just sit back and listen, but to fully engage. So anybody that has great strategies about how to make that a big part of your work in this kind of project would be great. And we'll share those strategies with everybody so you can maybe incorporate it in your project.
I'd want to take a moment and have you on your screen, and you may have to flip depending which screen you're on, but look for somebody special named Sarah Loken, and wave below because she is with us this morning from Community Shelter Board, and you'll be hearing from her and interacting with her in a little while, but she wanted to be with us from the very beginning. So welcome, Sarah. Glad you're here. Like last week, I want to encourage everybody to think for a moment about what you hope will happen for you today. When we end at 11:30, what do you hope you will have accomplished in your work with your project plans, your interaction and collaboration with your colleagues, whatever it may be. And if you are aware of a skill or a bit of knowledge that you feel you need to strengthen in order to complete the task, be ready to make us aware of that so that we can be responsive. But focus for a moment on what you hope to gain today and be aware of that so that hopefully those goals can be met by 11:30 today. As far as the goals that we have, as you know from the last couple of weeks, we have tried to focus on a piece of the model each time that we're together. So we did some special work on entry events. We did some special work on reflection and multiple intelligences last week. And our areas of focus to help you out a little bit today are on working with community partners, and also thinking about driving questions so that the questions you develop to guide the project have the pieces that will help them serve you well. So that is where we are headed. I want to thank you so much. Your attention to the exit tickets last week was very, very prompt and thorough, and you did a lot of deep thinking about what the session meant to you, and we so appreciate that. And it also gives us a sense of not only where you are individually, but where the group is collectively. And one of the things that was very clear from reading all the exit tickets was that the value of the multiple intelligences piece seemed to be significant for most, if not all of you, and we're really very pleased about that. And something that I want to point out about your comments and the exit tickets is that y'all did a terrific job of addressing the three pieces of reflection that we talked about. We had talked about how good reflection will talk about what, so what, and now what. In other words, as you're reflecting with kids on service learning, you want there to be some agreement about the what is it that we're engaged in, and where are we in the process. The so what is the individual meaning that kids each attach to that what. So what should be pretty universal. So what is going to be very different from kid to kid. And then the now what, in terms of how might I apply this in the future, or where can I go next with this, is really important in terms of getting kids to adapt, adopt a growth mindset and have their eyes on the future. And that really was very characteristic of your comments in the exit tickets. I mean, people said, here's what was important to me, here's why it was important to me, and here's what I plan to do with it next. And that's absolutely exactly what we are looking for. To reinforce that aspect of reflection, before we move on to today's topic, we have a wonderful video clip for you. Those of you that have taken our level 1 course have watched the movie Paper Clips with us. And if there are some of you in the group that have never seen the film, we absolutely encourage you to take advantage of that. It's available at local libraries. And also during the coming school year, we will probably sponsor a viewing of it online with a discussion. And so you'll have other opportunities to see it for the first time or to see it again. But the clip that we're going to show you is a news piece that was done with the key teacher in that project 20 years later. And you'll be able to tell from the clip that this was a project that revolved around the Holocaust and had a very simple beginning and grew to be a very significant project that has lasted a very long time. So you will see kids talking about the what and the so what, and you will definitely hear in the teachers how they talked about now what over a period of 20 years. Let's take a look at that together.
Well, 20 years ago, the principal of Whitwell Middle School wanted to teach the students about tolerating and respecting other cultures. During lessons on the Holocaust, the students suggested they collect 6 million paperclips for each of the Jewish victims. Now, 2 decades later, the school is still teaching its kids about different cultures. News 12's David Moore has another example of what's right with our schools.
Sandra Roberts, an 8th grade teacher at Whitwell Middle School, is teaching her students about the deadly power of prejudice. In her eyes, the Holocaust is the most significant example of this.
We told our students that 6 million Jews were killed.
It's so amazing that this project, which started off as a lesson for 16 children, is now celebrating its 20th year.
She decided that her students had to visually see the 6 million lives that were taken. So Roberts and her class began collecting paper clips.
I remember all through my middle school career, we were counting paper clips in class, we were reading letters, we were getting to see the people come in and visit us and speak with people from all over the world, and that was the big thing for me.
We now have a full-time visitor center with artifacts such as this Holocaust Torah, and it's amazing that people come here and 20 years have gone by.
Right here in front of me are all the letters that we have received from people all over the world. We have over 40,000 letters.
This is the Children's Holocaust Memorial card given to us by the Schroeders from Germany.
We hope that the love, hard work, and lessons of tolerance demonstrated by the students, staff, and community of Whitwell Middle School will encourage you to return to your own community, determined to make it a better place.
Since getting in the project, you kind of look at everyone the same because you notice that everybody's not different at all. You kind of start learning about this horrible thing that happens, and then you start getting deeper and deeper, and by the time you get to the 8th grade, you really are starting to understand it.
Over 400 students have been through this project, and we're so excited. We're inviting them all back, and I hope that Taylor and her students will continue to carry this forward for the next 20 years.
Great job, Whitwell Middle School. Hey, if you have an idea for a story, go to our website, WDEF.com. Look at the icon that says What's Right with Our Schools, and you will find a link to post your story idea.
Wait a minute, I have to get out of this.
Can we get the view of more than?
Yeah.
I'd love to get a few reactions from you to the video. As you watch that, what went through your mind or through your heart? What occurred to you?
Powerful.
Say it again.
It's really powerful.
Why is that?
I think because the kids were able to really understand something that's so hard to grasp, I think, for kids that age. And they did such a great job of making it very visual. And the lasting effects that can have on a child, and in the future with problems with discrimination. I just think it's a really powerful project.
Thank you. Other comments? Let's get a few more.
I love how these kids that come up every year can't wait to do something with this project. I mean, the buy-in, obviously it's 20 years in the making, right? But the buy-in, even before they get there, is already instilled in them. I mean, they're ready to go. They can't wait to jump in. So I think that's huge.
That's such a good point, Gina, that there's this age-old dispute about where project ideas come from. And there are some people in service learning will say it has to come from the kids, that can't come from the teachers, it has to come from the kids. And what we've always said is that kids need to be emotionally engaged in the project so that at some point they feel like it's theirs. And we have so many great examples of teachers who start a project in 5th grade and do it over a period of time, and kids when they're in kindergarten can't wait until they're in 5th grade, and it's because they are emotionally engaged in the topic. And I think Shake Pals, when Leah Miller talked about Shake Pals the other day, nobody could convince me that those then 6th graders can't wait until they have her as a teacher at the high school and can take Shakespeare, especially if they're going to do that project again.
Something to remember for those of you who've seen the film, and it's a lesson the rest of you can understand as well. When they started out in Whitwell, the only goal in the beginning was to teach about the Holocaust as an example of prejudice and oppression. They did not have in mind at the beginning that they were going to become teachers of others about this topic. That all evolved over time. So this project is way impressive, but it's a wonderful lesson in trusting your instincts and letting things evolve. So when you hook into a topic that you know is important and has some great possibilities with kids, just launch wherever and whenever you're ready. And it's okay to see what course this takes. It is, of course, important to us that you all know the steps in the model and you know how to construct a good project. but it's also important to go with the flow and be open to possibilities. These folks trusted their instincts, and what evolved over a period of two decades has been remarkable.
When we, I think maybe the first session we talked, or the second, talked about the best days you had with kids, and said, you know, that's a rubric that we can use in designing projects that we want to try to provide experiences for kids that create more of those best days. What are a couple of things that you saw demonstrated by what the kids said about the project, or the teacher said about the project, that might have been on your rubric? These are the strategies we need from you on how to engage people in discussion.
Them actually doing the project. So like they were collecting the paper clips and counting the paper clips and like engaging into it, so then they could truly see the impact of what 6 million was.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point when you talk about counting them, and the way that each detail was treasured and treated with respect, and as a sign of something permanent that needed to be preserved. When you think about that project and how the letters were being classified and maintained, and the math was counting the paper clips and tracking a percentage that was utilized from every donation they got from all over the world, and the letters that they read, and the displays they created, and the music they chose for the dedication ceremony. When you think back to the multiple intelligences that we dealt with last week, virtually every one of those is utilized in some form in that project model. And they probably weren't even necessarily tapping into that at the time, but instinctively they did the right things. One of the things that strikes me is just the amount of empathy that kids had for. Now, in the movie, you will see that they do meet some Holocaust survivors, but those paper clips became real people to them. Mm-hmm. They symbolized a human life that was lost. And so I was thinking the other day that we have a number of schools that work with Ronald McDonald House and collect the the tabs from the cans and donate, and how easy it would be to have kids think about each one of those tabs as a child with cancer, and what a difference it would make. You know, we can be intentional on either teaching empathy or revealing empathy. And that was a great example of it. Thank you for paying such great attention to that and thinking about it deeply. We encourage you that there's a second brief clip on the in Google Classroom, and it was tough for us to decide which one to pick for the class session. So we encourage you to watch the other one when you have a chance, and by all means to see the film at the earliest opportunity for you. One of the lessons in the film has to do with the reduction of stereotypes, certainly, because kids entered that process with some preconceived notions or a complete lack of understanding and knowledge where Jews are concerned. And so in many of the projects that you encounter, there will be a need to think about what are kids' attitudes at the beginning, and what types of experiences will you provide to make their attitudes come into alignment with reality. And that is certainly one of the things that Sarah Loken deals with regard to the homeless population in her work at the Community Shelter Board. So we have asked her to come talk with you a bit about her collaboration with teachers and why she values that, why her organization does. She serves on the board of our nonprofit organization, and she's a pal of ours, so please be nice. And before Sarah starts, I'm going to suggest when she starts to talk, if she doesn't show up on your page, you can just switch to speaker view, and then you'll see her speaking.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I'm going to share my screen with you. And then I'm going to ask if you can see my opening slide and if you can see my face still. Yeah, we're good?
Mhm.
Okay, sweet. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Kathy and Ellen, for inviting me. I really enjoy any and every opportunity that I get to interact with this work and the organization. I really value it, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about why. But I'm also going to just introduce you to myself, to Community Shelter Board, to the mission, and kind of give you an update on the state of homelessness. And I'm excited for the opportunity to do that. My name is Sarah Loken. I have spent my entire career in the homeless services sector. I have children in Pickerington schools, and I'm a student of service learning myself. So this all comes together really nicely for me. I am with Community Shelter Board, and if you haven't heard of this organization before, it's our job to lead the coordination and the collective community effort to make sure that everyone in Columbus and Franklin County has a place to call home. So we oversee all the shelters, prevention programs, street outreach, and housing programs in the homeless system. We are responsible for doing all the strategic planning around those services, budgeting, data collection and analysis, and more. We manage the lease up of some specialized housing for people who have experienced homelessness, and we are the conduit for all public funding for homelessness at the local, state, and federal levels. So you'll see on this slide, if you haven't heard of Community Shelter Board, you have probably heard of Volunteers of America or Faith Mission or Huckleberry House. So we have 17 partners across the community who actually deliver the services, kind of boots on the ground in the field. And we all work really, really closely together. And this collective network of agencies served 15,000 people last year that had an experience with homelessness. And that's just in Columbus and Franklin County. In Columbus, we really are living in a growing community, a fast growing community. So leaders here are projecting an additional 1 million people are going to populate the 7-county region of Central Ohio by the year 2050. Just in Franklin County alone, where probably most of us live, we're projected to grow by nearly 400,000 people by the year 2050. So as the population grows, so does the number of people who experience homelessness. 1,700 more people have become homeless since 2010, and the majority of that increase in homelessness is just because of population growth alone. The trouble with population growth is that in our community, there's not enough housing for everyone, and rents are rising in Columbus faster than the national average. That brings me to really wanting to point out some of the common misperceptions about who is homeless and how that happens to somebody. You may think of homelessness and think of someone that you have encountered panhandling on the street. And that's certainly legit. But in our community, the majority of people who are experiencing homelessness and showing up at a homeless shelter are actually families with children. You don't see them necessarily panhandling on the street, but that's the majority of who is homeless. And I encounter in my work a lot of misperceptions about how homelessness would happen to someone. There certainly are stories of people who have experienced drug addiction or had a really serious kind of health problem or mental health challenge that kept them from working and being able to take care of themselves. But most often, I'm encountering in the shelters people who are working full-time, but are making minimum wage and actually can't afford the typical apartment in Columbus. So, you know, it's not always what you might expect. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. You know, the kind of housing that we need for, unless we're going to address in our community the minimum wage issue, we need more affordable housing, which is just housing that can be afforded based on the current wages in any given area. In Columbus and Franklin County, it's been quantified that we have a shortage of about 54,000 places for people to live who need that affordable housing. That's a giant gap. In the meantime, it's more and more difficult for poor people to find housing, as I said, because in our community, average rents have increased 38% over 5 years, which is really dramatic. There's research that shows that an increase in rent is associated with an increase in homelessness. That's based on some national research. And then in our community, we also have an eviction problem. We've got higher eviction rates than we should in Columbus. And an eviction really creates a major problem for a family or an individual because it places kind of a stain on that record. And a little known fact that really surprised me is that even having an eviction filed against you for, let's say, non-payment of rent or late payment of rent if something really terrible happened, like a global pandemic. Having an eviction filed, even if you manage to scrape together that money and repair the relationship with the landlord and avoid that eviction, that filing is on your credit report for perhaps ever. And you know, an apartment community or a property manager who you are filling out an application with 10 years later to try to move, that rental property manager is looking at your credit report and is not savvy enough to be able to tell the difference. And neither am I, that was an eviction filing and not an actual eviction set out. And so people who've even had evictions filed against them are being turned away and closed out of housing options when they go into the rental market. That's a major problem. I also want to talk just a little bit about what has happened with the global pandemic with regard to homelessness, because this has not been obvious to everyone that I speak with. You know, we've all, especially you all, have experienced major implications in the way you do your work as a result of the economy being shut down and during a stay-at-home order, something so dramatic that has never happened before in our lifetimes. And I think it's been a common experience to kind of check in with each other and say, how has this affected your work? And I've thought a lot about your work. You may have not thought much about my work or somehow some other social service industries have been affected. But in the homeless system, you know, on a good day, we are working to prevent homelessness whenever we can. And if homelessness does happen, we work to respond really quickly and respond with programs that help people get back into housing as fast as possible. So it's all we do. We prevent. If it does end up happening, we respond with housing as quickly as we can. No matter the program, no matter the clinical setting, no matter the situation, we're focused on prevention and then a really quick response focused on housing. So with COVID, we are taking the same approach. We're working really hard to prevent the spread of illness wherever possible among people who are homeless. And if someone who is homeless does get sick, we have to respond really quickly with isolation and quarantine. I want to show you these images of what shelters look like if you haven't been in one before. They're extremely crowded congregate settings by design because of course that's the most efficient thing to do. But when you think about a stay-home order and where you have been since March, imagine being here and this man coughing on you while you lay in the bed next to him. This has presented a significant challenge for us and has frankly been quite scary. This is another dorm where you see folks are bunked up. There are two people in these bunk beds right here, and they're in a dormitory that looks like this. Those beds are really, really close together. This is a dining area. This is how close people are together eating their meals. This is a men's shelter, and here's a family shelter. Again, where, you know, we've got congregate settings and people sitting very close to one another to eat their meals. So this is a breeding ground for illness. You know, this looks probably like your school's cafeteria, which was shut down immediately, right? Because this is not safe for kids to be this close together during rampant illness. We can't shut down homeless shelters. If we did, there would be roughly 1,200, 1,300 people on the streets without access to places to wash their hands or sleep or have access to food. And frankly, all the soup kitchens and feeding sites did shut down. All of the libraries did shut down. All of the rec centers where someone could normally go to use the restroom and wash their hands shut down. The only thing that stayed open was homeless shelters. And the reason that we were able to do that without having rampant spread of illness was that we expanded, and we had to act really quickly to figure out how to achieve CDC recommended social distancing in our homeless shelters. And it was only possible to do that by taking over some other facilities. So what you're looking at here is the gymnasium at the historic YMCA downtown building at 40 West Long Street. And these mats, although they do not look terribly comfy, are 6 feet apart. And so this is a safer environment in which people who have no better option and have no home to stay home in, a safer place for them to be with definitely stepped up cleaning and things happening in the space to keep it safe. This is Sullivan Gardens Rec Center, which was closed because of the pandemic. And we worked with City Parks and Rec to take this over and again, set up accommodations for roughly 100 more people to have a safe place to be socially distanced while they are homeless. We set up between these multiple facilities, I'm just showing you 2 of them, we set up 250 beds outside of our normal shelters to achieve social distancing. And this allowed us in some of those other crowded shelters that I showed you to spread those beds apart, to unbunk the bunk beds and really have safe accommodations in all of our facilities. The other thing that was really important that we had to do was when someone does become ill, they can't stay in any of these facilities, even if the beds are 6 feet apart. We had to find a way, a safe way to provide isolation and quarantine for people who were sick or exposed to the illness. And so we achieved that through the use of a motel, which is open right now. And we currently have 5 patients being treated in a medical setting of a motel, which was a completely new effort for us. We don't have medical facilities, but this was an expertise that we had to acquire really, really quickly. And you know, it's interesting, during a stay-home order, you can't actually stay home if you don't have a home. And these facilities for isolation and quarantine were really, really important because they are for people who are not sick enough to be in the hospital, but they have tested positive or they have been exposed. If they had a home, they would be home resting on the couch and eating soup and kind of taking it easy for a couple of weeks while they get better. They don't have a home. And so we had to find a place to put them where they're not going to infect other people, but they are able to recuperate and return to health and then get back to the business of finding a place to live. So right now we have 91 motel rooms for isolation and quarantine. I want to say so far our peak has been having about 30 of those motel rooms in use on any given time. And right now we've got 5, as I mentioned, five patients, one of which is a family in isolation and quarantine. Going forward, this is a marathon and not a sprint. It's not going to be over anytime soon. We're trying to do the kind of planning that you are doing right now to figure out what this new world looks like and how you're going to teach in this new environment. We're figuring out how much worse is it going to get, and how do we need to be ready to respond to perhaps more incidences of homelessness with rising unemployment rates, with a backlog of evictions that are going to be filed and actually processed. And the Los Angeles Times is predicting that as we see unemployment rise as a result of the pandemic, we should expect a significant increase in numbers of homelessness across the US. So we're doing a lot of planning to try to ready our system for that, focused on not building more shelters to respond to that need, but focusing on stepping up our prevention efforts and making sure that we're really well prepared to rapidly rehouse people who do become homeless as fast as possible. And we're actually looking at purchasing a motel so that we own it and don't have to deal with like a long-term lease. Because especially as the economy reopens and as motels reopen, it's harder and harder to find places to do safe isolation and quarantine. So this is expected to go on long enough that we're actually thinking about purchasing our own motel, and ideally when the pandemic ends, converting it into some sort of housing for the people we serve. I want to say a few words about why I value work with teachers and students, and why Community Shelter Board values work with teachers and students. As I said, I'm a student of service learning, and it really shaped my path to go into the homeless services sector in a very literal way. I think that the work that you're doing around service learning really leads young people to a connection in civic engagement. And that is quite literally the only way that we're going to make progress on big problems like homelessness, like hunger, like poverty in our community. Everyone has to care about it. This kind of work, marrying educational curriculum with community-based work and focus on others, really creates empathy in our students, and you know this, which is why you're taking Kathy and Ellen's courses. It opens people's eyes and hearts to problems that might otherwise be invisible, especially for those of us kind of living far enough away from the downtown core that we don't have to see these problems every day. We can come and go from work and school and from the grocery store and not encounter too many people that look terribly different than us. And that's a problem. That's a problem, quite frankly. And so I really, really value the work that you are doing to bring these invisible problems in front of your students and have them not be able to say, I've never heard of that before. I never thought about a family not having enough food before. I never thought about what would happen if my family was not able to live here, and where would we go? As teachers, you're really helping us reach the masses to help grab the attention of people who need to care about these issues. And your students have networks in neighborhoods that we can't otherwise reach. At the Community Shelter Board, we are a fundraising machine. And I'm really proud of who we're able to reach and what we're able to raise, but it's endless. It's a never ending job, and it's a pound of flesh for every dollar that we raise. And your students have access in places that we can't reach otherwise. We've had some really fantastic response during the pandemic. And one example I want to give to you of a service learning opportunity that I think is so rich with connections is the need for masks. And we've had a lot of groups take this on for us. But homemade masks can be tied to an awareness campaign about homelessness, with students educating others, saying, did you know that 3,000 children were homeless last year in Columbus shelters? How many masks can you collect from neighbors on your street when you think about those numbers? It can be tied to research about rates of infection in Franklin County or in the county in which a student lives. How does social distancing slow the spread of the virus? That's great research and knowledge for students to acquire. I think it would be incredible for students to pursue new techniques for no-sew masks. I've seen some pretty simple DIY videos on YouTube, but I'm sure there's more. There's so many fascinating products out there, and not all of us sew. Some of us are learning to sew because of the need for masks, but I know there are other techniques out there for how masks can be made really simply without a sewing machine. And then obviously, like math and budgeting for fabric and other materials, that definitely can go a long way being tied to curriculum. Just one example, there have been so many opportunities and so many young people that have stepped up and helped us out. You see a sweet family here who helped us with some snack packs for our efforts to feed people while all of the soup kitchens have been shut down. So I just want to thank you. I just really, really want to thank you. I'm amazed to see how many people are in the session today, how large your numbers are, the enthusiastic levels of interest. This is a really powerful and creative network that I'm proud to be part of, that truly inspires young people to build better communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to go back to where we can see everybody.
Wait, she's not there. You go.
All right. I would like you to raise your hand if you heard anything today that you didn't know before. Yes, indeed. This is so important to us that you really think about the importance of connecting with knowledgeable and committed people in the community. If you and your kids decide to tackle something locally, by all means, think about connecting in a meaningful way with a partner agency or individual. If you gained perspective in the last 15 or 20 minutes that you would not have had before, think about how important that is going to be for your students. I'm curious, what was for you personally an important takeaway from the session with Sarah? What did you not know that, or what was reinforced that you felt was very important information?
I think one of the reminders or something that's good to hear again is the part about homelessness and evictions and things like that aren't always a result of, someone just not working or, the sort of stereotype of just like being lazy, not going out and getting a job. It could be a result of, rent has increased even just a little, what seems like a marginal amount. And those issues of, if you're evicted, that's sort of that mark on your record to go out and get housing the next time. So it's kind of, it's easy for sort of people that are removed from it to oversimplify it and say, well, just get a job or, so I think reminding people of those type of things.
Absolutely. Somebody else, what was another item that was valuable to you in that?
I am amazed to see, the different strategies that they took to help these people, like the motels, that nobody, I was thinking about, wow, that is an incredible idea, and to help that people, and also with the vision that they have, right? Not only in case that they don't find any place, as this continue to be able to keep them to be a permanent residences for those families. But I can imagine mean, the amount of support that they need, I mean, to get those places and to keep this and going. And I have taken so many notes in here for especially for my Spanish club we do a lot of service projects. And that's what I was asking her for, her contact information. There are so many ways that we're not, I do a lot of service projects in our school, also the different grade levels, but with this opens so many other, even strategies from home. If we stay here or we do blended to be able to help them. So thank you very much for Kathy and you guys for bringing it. Thank you to Sarah for sharing that information.
Well, and we want to use, we're so pleased to be able to share Sarah's story and the Community Shelter Board story, and hopefully there will be a number of you who are interested in doing something around homelessness as a result of this. But also we want you to think about this as a model of how we can work with a variety of community agencies because they have needs that when we really find out what the priority needs are, there's lots of ways that schools can help to meet those needs. Not, Sarah said they are in the business of fundraising all the time. But your work, when you use language arts or media skills or Spanish skills to raise awareness of the need, can result in fundraising, more fundraising and easier fundraising for them. And so when you're thinking about your projects, and I love the Shake Pals project in the same way I love the people working with hunger and homelessness. But there are ways that we need to adapt in this era of either, distance learning or blended learning. And some of the things are, how can we recreate entry events that are emotionally engaging for kids? And I think you can see the power of bringing Sarah into this group and hearing the story firsthand. That's something that we can do even in distance learning. We're all in different places. We spoke with Amanda Fountain, who teaches broadcast journalism at Upper Arlington High School. And she's very interested in doing videos, interviews, virtual tours when you can't take field trips, and having her kids connect their content to that as a resource for you. So when you're thinking about your projects, think about how can we adapt and do things differently that may be just as powerful, and in some ways more powerful.
Sarah, thank you so much. I'm going to ask everybody to unmute again for a moment so that you can hear the thunderous applause.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I see the chat comments popping up with some requests for my contact information and some requests for the photos that I shared. I'd be more than happy to pass along my slides so that you have access to that. And I'll include my contact info there. Is it okay to just send it your way, Kathy and Ellen, and you can push it out?
Absolutely. And I will send you, as soon as I figure out how to do it, the chat so that you've got everything that's listed on there.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to use that topic as just an example to help you get a quick understanding and a little easier grasp on what we mean by driving questions. So if you will look at that section on the agenda, it will tell you what a driving question is supposed to do for your project. It should generate interest and curiosity. So you should be crafting questions, and you and the kids can do this together. You can start off with a tentative one, and the kids may make your driving question catchier, better, more intriguing, more compelling. But you want to generate some interest. You want it to give focus to the project and make the goal clear so that if you have a good driving question or a good set of driving questions, they will be ones that at the beginning of this journey, you and the kids cannot adequately answer, and at the end you can. Okay, so the questions tip you off to where you're headed. We recommend that when you put the question together or a set of questions together, that you have an inquiry component that leads off that deals with what is or why is something the case, and then an action component that addresses it by saying, how can we meaning the kids, not you, the teacher, but we, the kids, do something about that. So I gave you an easy example on the agenda there of how you could connect to the issue of homelessness. So if we were using an interaction with Sarah as an entry event, then perhaps our driving questions would look like this. What conditions and challenges can lead to homelessness in our community? You know more about that now than you did an hour ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're on the way. So that is the inquiry part. Then the action part for the kids might be, as writers, artists, researchers, and videographers, how can we help raise awareness about the important work done by Community Shelter Board? So you might have decided that's what you're going to do. You're going to raise awareness about CSB, because then raising awareness about that filters out to all of the shelters and so forth that they serve. Is that, just by nod of the head or thumbs up, is that understandable how you would put those pieces together, an inquiry piece and an action piece? Okay, and so then if you were thinking about the project in paper clips, the questions might have been, what was the Holocaust and how can we help others understand its significance? That tells you exactly what that project was about. It was about getting a deeper understanding of it to begin with, and then making sure that they did some things to ensure that no one would forget and that people would understand the importance. Anybody have questions about that before we touch on one other piece before we send you to breakouts for the bulk of the session? Any lack of clarity about driving questions?
And while you're thinking about that, if you did not sign up on the form for the breakout rooms, who you wanted in your breakout rooms, or if you wanted to be individually, send it to me in chat. If you already added it to that list, I've got it, and I'll put you in those breakout rooms. But if you didn't, then put it in chat.
Okay, if you will take a look on your copy of the agenda, it says talking points for project sharing during sessions 5 and 6. Okay, this is where I always say to folks, no panic attacks, please. Your whole plan does not need to be finished by any stretch of the imaginations. All that you or your group need to be able to do is just briefly address the talking points about your progress so far. And I think that these should be manageable enough that even if you're only a third or a halfway through your plan, you would still be able to speak to those. So we'll have you identify who's on your design team if it's more than just you. The what that we want you to talk about is your project title and what you're focusing on. The why is a statement of rationale. Why did you pick that? Why do you think it's a significant topic? And under how, 3 very simple things. And one of the entry events that you might use, some ideas that you have for action the kids might take, and subject areas that you plan to connect with. For the purposes of these brief chats that we'll do in class next week and the week after, you do not need to do that curriculum piece with the specific standards, but in your template you should. When you write it up, you should be specific, but it will just be general in those terms next week. Kathy will share with you at the end of the session today. She'll show you where in Google Classroom she has provided a template for 2 slides to go with your presentation. So all you're going to have to do is go to those slides and type in a few keywords and phrases that speak to each of those points. Okay. Now, clearly in your work time today, if you're individual, you can do this certainly when you want, but since if you're a part of a design team and you'll be together, you might want to talk a little bit about how you can respond to each of those talking points next week, because our time in the next 2 sessions will be spent with everybody sharing what direction they're taking and us being able, all of us being able to make additional suggestions and provide feedback. Anybody got questions? Okay. We want you to comfortably take a break. It is 10:28. We would like you to be in your breakout groups by 10:35. You'll be given 40 minutes, and we will close the breakout rooms at 11:15 and pull people back to large group. Now, while you are in your breakout, if you have a question for us, we're going to leave the large meeting room open so you can come back to the big room and find us if you have a question or if you need something.
Or if I put you in the wrong breakout room.
Yeah. Also, don't forget that you have the option to sign up for a 30-minute help session tomorrow or Thursday. We kind of prefer you use the Thursday time if possible, but if not, the Wednesday slots are okay. But through your discussions today, you should be able to determine whether you do or don't need to access some of that assistance, but it will be available if you need it. Anything else? All right. We hope you have a good experience in your breakouts, and we'll see you in a little while. Thanks. Okay,
now we're recording. I think we're all back.
All right, welcome back, everybody. How did your groups go? Give me a thumbs up if you're feeling pleased with your progress there. Okay, now I'm hoping that if you're not like this, you're at least like this. Please don't be like this without letting us know what we can do to help, all right?
Hey, Ellen.
Yes.
I just have a quick question. Do you want us to do the slide thing projects or just one project?
If you're working in, well, you can do as many as you want, but if you're working in a design team, it would be good to do 2 projects instead of just 1.
So you want us to do the slide assignment for both?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Well, let me answer you. If you are far enough along in developing more than one idea that you can do that, that would be wonderful. Folks, if you are not muted, please mute because we're getting some feedback. Thank you. We don't want you to feel a terrible amount of pressure going into the last 2 sessions, but honestly, if you've been working on 2 good ideas and you can show us a little bit of what you have in mind for each of them, that's great. Please understand that the purpose of these next 2 sessions is not for you all to please us and get your ticket punched and get your credit. I mean, this is not a conventional presentation for a grade per se. The purpose is for everybody to get excited at the wonderful variety of things that is emerging here. So it is a celebration. It is not an assessment exercise, you know. So you are lifting up what you're working on and why you're excited about so that the rest of us can get excited as well and see the range of things that is being created, which is indeed very exciting and impressive. So hopefully that answers your question. You're not under pressure to do more than one thing, but if you're able to lift up a couple of ideas at this point so we know what you're working toward, we would love to see as much of your work as possible.
And since we're talking about the slides, we think the way we did it will work. We created the slide template and shared it. You all should have your own copies. There's actually 2 slides with the questions that we wanted you to answer. It's short, bullet point is great. And then if my thought is that you could, when it's time for you or your design team to share, that what you would share your screen with everybody else to see those slides. If you have any questions about that, we've not done this. Let's see, Dana just asked a question. If I'm working with a partner, do we need to do 2 projects?
If you are truly collaborating on a project, then we would love to see the results of that. If you have simply been interacting in a breakout room but are choosing to work independently, that's up to you. Some of you have actually been in breakout room together to support each other's brainstorming, but you're working on your own thing. So whatever you submit to the group and to us should be a reflection of the projects that you actually intend to either carry out or develop for other people's reference. And remember, if you and your colleagues produce more than one project, it doesn't mean that anybody is looking over your shoulder thinking that you will necessarily carry those out this coming year. The purpose of this was to create ideas both for yourselves and for interested other people who are new to this but might try an interesting idea. If they go to the resources and they see this idea, they're more likely to attempt it.
Does that answer your, Dana? Good. All right. So anyway, as far as the slides, in my thinking about how this works, I shared it so that you all had a copy. If you're working in a team, you're really only going to use one set of slides. You don't have to do all of them. And then I believe you'll be able to share your screen with everybody else to show your slides when it's your turn. And obviously we'll do some next week and some the week after. We won't be able to get through everybody. But if you have, it'd be good if you practiced it maybe once before then, because as you know, we've learned something new every week. This is the 4th week, and it's the first time I've actually recorded the entire session the way it was supposed to be recorded. So if you have any problems with sharing your slides, let us know, and we'll try to walk through together on that.
The other reason to practice it, and we're begging you to do that at least one run through, is that we really do want to stick with 2 to 3 minutes per person. We know you're excited, you've got lots to share, but we want you to stay to the essentials, and basically you're given a 2 to 3 minute pitch, why this is a good idea and why you're excited. So
I wanted to also, while I'm thinking about this, so as you remember, I think it was session 2 that, when did we have Leah in? 2. In session 2, we had Leah Miller and Kim Wilson present their projects. And I, of course, messed up the recording on that. They were kind enough to meet with us on Zoom another time, and we recorded it. So it's in the session 2 material, class session on Google Classroom. And honestly, even if you were here and heard them present, if you want a lift, the second time was even more impressive. Just not, they're both doable projects that really anybody could do, but their hope for education and the smiles on their faces when they were talking about these projects and working with kids, even in the depth of this pandemic, I just could never I thought I could never be any prouder of teachers than I've been all along, but through this, we are so proud of you. And I was listening to a master class. Ellen's getting nervous here. I'll say it quickly, but I have a subscription to Masterclass, and I was listening to, what's her name?
Doris Kearns Goodwin.
And about presidents and leadership qualities that she's exhibited in them. If you heard her talk about what was most important in the leadership qualities of people who generally want to make a difference in the world, it was like your rubric of best days. It was emotional intelligence. It was empathy. It was being able to want to do something for somebody else than yourself. And that's what you're creating in kids. And you never know the impact that's going to have on them.
Okay, a couple of reminders. So your project templates are something that we hope you will continue to work on and let us know what kind of help you need, but they are not due yet. So your more immediate thing that you want to capture are those highlights that belong on the slides for presentations next week and the week after. Secondly, when we have these sessions in the next 2 weeks, they are partly about what's presented, but a lot about the feedback that we give to each person who presents. And so what will happen is we'll have somebody give their 2 to 3 minute pitch, but then we'll get 2 people to respond to each of those. And we're not going to assign that, but we want you to do your very best in terms of listening and giving good collegial feedback. And when you experience it this way and that feedback loop is built in, I think it will say something to you about how you want to go about similar encounters with kids, that it's not just about the presentations, it's also about the interaction that happens for a short time after each one. Don't forget your exit ticket. Don't forget to sign up for a help session if you need one. And you always have the opportunity, if you don't need the 30-minute help session, but you need to run a question by us on email or by phone, please don't hesitate to do that at whatever time is convenient for you. What questions do you have exiting today? Anybody at all? Do you want to sing Kumbaya or the Victors? It's up to you.
Or go Bucks. We'll put everything, including the video of this class session, in the session 4 folder in Google Classroom, and have a good week.
Yes, when we speak of this class, our friends ask us how it's going, and it brings us nearly to tears in a good way. So you should know that we are really moved by your efforts and so proud of you for trying this process with us. I see OHIO. I think it's OHO no, isn't it?
No.
I believe it is.
How many years has, oh, I'm sorry.
Signing off. Take care. Have a great week. And we will see you next Tuesday if we don't see you before. All right. Love y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.